You're all set.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this AIM Center webinar, Reading for All, Part 3, Creating Accessible Content with EPUB. This is the third and final webinar in a three-part series focusing on EPUB, and we're so happy that you're joining us this afternoon. Just a few housekeeping details before we get started with the content of the webinar. We are providing closed captions this afternoon. You can select the closed caption button on your Zoom menu bar to view those closed captions. And the captions will appear along the bottom of the screen. And I just found out before we started the webinar that you can also choose save or view transcript from the same menu in the Zoom toolbar. So you have some options for how you are able to view the captions. And then we are going to be using the text chat quite a bit. We hope that you will use that chat to have conversation with each other and share your questions that you have as we go over the content. And it's a great way to build community and get to know each other in the chat. So we encourage you to use the chat and make the webinars interactive as possible. Just make sure, as a quick reminder, that you choose all panelists and attendees from the drop-down menu that's right below where the text entry field is. That way your message or your question is visible to everyone and it doesn't go to just one person. That will make sure that we can see your questions so that we get to them at the appropriate time during the webinar. There are some materials available for this webinar to support the content that we're going to be covering during the webinar, and there will also be a recording. So this is being recorded, and we typically make the recording available about a week after the webinar has taken place. Gives us some time to add closed captions to the recording, and then it will be posted on the AIM Center website. The materials for today include a copy of these slides, as well as a digital handout. And we encourage you to check out the digital handout. It's going to have some notes with the key points that we're going to address during the webinar, as well as links to any resources that we mentioned, whether it's a page where you can learn more about a topic or a tool that we're going to be mentioning. That way you can find it all in one place and you can worry about listening to the webinar or watching the demonstrations and not have to worry as much about, capturing that information. That will be in the digital handout for you. So on the AIM Center website, there's an events area, but I will provide you with the link to that. We created a short URL and I'll read it out loud, and Leslie's also going to drop it into the chat. And that is bit.ly, that's bit.ly/, and then the ending is reading for all 3. And that's the number 4, the number 3, and the 2 words reading and all are all in lowercase. So this is case sensitive. You want to make sure you type that in to your web browser in that exact way. So bit.ly, bit.ly/, reading, the number 4, and then all, ALL, and the number 3. All right, so I am Luis Perez. I'm a technical assistant specialist at CAST. I'm primarily assigned to the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials. And with me, I have Christine Jones from Benetech. Christine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. It's Christine here, and I work at Benetech, which is the parent company of a service many of you probably know of as Bookshare. And at Benetech, I oversee the literacy-related support and outreach efforts primarily around Bookshare. But I have the privilege of working with others at Benetech who are really focused on beyond Bookshare, how to help content creators make materials that work for all learners. And so we've been looking at these issues for a while, and it's just wonderful to be able to work with Luis on this webinar series. So looking forward to sharing some more great information today.
Great, thank you, Christine. And I mentioned one person already, but Leslie O'Callaghan is also with us from CAST, helping us out with the chat and sharing resources and addressing any technical issues that you have during the webinar. And then I also want to acknowledge Darla, who's providing the closed captions. So thank you, Darla, for providing that service today. All right, so the topics that we're going to cover today include the following. So first, we want to make sure that we do a quick review of the key ideas that were addressed in the first two webinars in this series. So just in case you were not able to attend those two webinars or watch the recordings, we just want to go over some of the key messages around the importance of EPUB in K-12. And Christine is going to lead us through that section of the presentation. And then the rest of the time today is going to focus on, now that you know a little bit about EPUB, you know where to get some high quality EPUB titles, but you want to create your own. How do you go about doing that? And so we're going to focus on two different workflows for doing that. One, using the free Word to EPUB plugin. This is a plugin for Microsoft Word that allows you to export a Microsoft Word file as EPUB. And then the other one is if you're creating open educational resources, how to export out of the Open Author online tool. This is an online authoring tool for OER Commons. So we'll mention more details about these two different workflows when we get to that part of the presentation. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Christine, who's going to do just a quick review of the last two webinars in this series. And just as a reminder, we recorded those two webinars that took place already. They're available on our website as well.
Great. Thank you, Luis. So yes, the big question here is, why should I ask for EPUB? Why should I create materials in EPUB for learners? And we believe that EPUB is the ideal format for learners to be able to access content regardless of their learning style or ability or disability. We believe it's the one format that's going to really be kind of a, one format fits everyone reading experience. And so the first webinar that we did, we basically explained what EPUB is. We realized it's probably a relatively new term to many, although EPUBs have been around for a few years at least. And basically it boils down to that's essentially a website reduced down to a single file. And so there's a lot of functionality built into it. It's very robust. It has the capability for a lot of features and interactivity and flexibility. It's flowable. It is customizable. And basically, it's a format that has now been very widely adopted in the post-secondary space in terms of textbooks, particularly. And so we're eager to see a similar type of adoption in the K-12 space. And that was the sort of the spirit in which we came together on this webinar series. For a while now, I know organizations like CAST and Benetech have been wrestling and grappling with what guidance to give school districts that are purchasing materials to ensure that those materials are going to be workable for the broadest number of learners, and to limit the amount of remediation that needs to be done to materials when they're acquired, with the mindset that we want to see school districts purchase materials that really work for all learners and not have kind of a mentality of, let's get stuff that works for 85% of our learners, and the other 15% we'll just have to figure out what we're going to do for them, or we're going to retrofit the materials or whatever. There's really no need for that kind of approach anymore with a format like EPUB, because it will meet pretty much all of the requirements of both groups and save everyone time and money of having to, remediate or retrofit materials for some of your learners. In addition, for typical learners who don't need any kind of remediation, it's a wonderful experience as well. So we think it's a great format. And the other piece of it here is that there are not enough vendors producing EPUB, and there are not enough tool vendors who are making their tools read EPUB. So the more that you all start expecting, asking for, demanding EPUB in terms of when you're purchasing materials, the more likely those tool vendors are going to get on board and the tool vendors will make their tools read EPUB, and the producers of content will produce content in EPUB, because we just think this is really the best way to go. We both Benetech and CAST had been putting out lists of sort of checklists of things to ask about when you're purchasing materials or creating materials, things to keep in mind to make sure that materials that you create or purchase work for the widest variety of learners. But we're really excited to be able to sort of boil it all down now and just say, ask for EPUB, ask for EPUB, ask for EPUB from your content creators, ask for EPUB of yourselves when you're making EPUB. It's just going to be an optimal solution for all of your learners. And it does prepare them for a lifetime of reading, as Luis has here on the slide, because of the fact that it will be very common in the post-secondary space. So in the first webinar, we talked a lot about that and about some of the different sources of EPUBs. We talked about a website called Standard eBooks, which is basically the one source of copyright-free ebooks that can be downloaded and experimented with. We talked about a few reading tools that read EPUB, and we'll go over some of those again today. We talked about Bookshare and how it offers EPUB for those individuals who qualify. And then Bookshare also has 10,000 freely available titles. For anyone who doesn't qualify for Bookshare, they can access those titles and either read them through the Bookshare web reader, which happens to open the EPUB file of the book in the background, or they can download the EPUB version of that book and read it with a compatible reading tool. So we talked about places to get EPUBs, and then some of the features of EPUBs that, as I mentioned, that they're customizable, they're flowable, they're very flexible. So we kind of explored some of those features last time. And then we talked last time about, again, where to find high quality EPUBs, what makes an EPUB high quality. We explored some of the features. So those are some of the important pieces of information that we covered. So I definitely encourage you to go back and look at the recordings, view the recordings from the past two webinars, as it will provide a good background for all of this.
Great. And just to summarize, so some of what Nicole just mentioned. So again, it's that customizable reading experience with lots of options for personalization. So on the last webinar, we did a few demos where we showed, you can use read aloud, you can adjust the text size, you can change the background colors, select different fonts, lots of options there. As Christine mentioned, it's widely adopted, so it will prepare learners once they get used to it in K-12. They'll be prepared for having this kind of reading experience in higher ed and the publishing industry. And then another benefit is that it's based on standard web technologies, because as Christine said, it's basically a website that has been compressed into a single file for making it easier to distribute. And so having standard web technologies means that you have really robust support for accessibility as well. So Christine, you want to talk about EPUB and in terms of compared to other formats as well?
Sure. So basically, again, the reasons that we're highly recommending EPUB, but we do believe it's a superior reading experience to PDF. We know that PDF has been a format that a lot of folks are comfortable with and have gotten accustomed to, but we do believe that EPUB provides a much better reading experience. So we think it's worth taking the time to learn how to use them and learn where to find them, and certainly to ask for them. And then similarly, compared with Microsoft Word, of course, Microsoft Word is more flowable and navigable than a PDF generally. However, the ability to open an EPUB in different reading apps and tools that provide a really nice interface on the front of the file, we think is, again, a superior reading experience. Microsoft Word is certainly a good option for accessible reading, and we're excited that Bookshare offers its entire collection, more than 925,000 titles for qualified members, can all be downloaded as Microsoft Word documents, and also all of those 10,000 freely available books can be downloaded as Microsoft Word documents and read in Microsoft Immersive Reader, for example, which is a really wonderful tool. But more broadly, we think that the tools that read EPUBs are again going to offer a superior reading experience, especially for people who really want the customization options and the ability to choose different voices and generally really pick the preferences that make the reading experience work for them.
Thanks so much, Christine, for that great summary. So I want to pause here before we go on to the next segment and see of these reasons that we've mentioned, which ones resonate with you, or if there's anything that you want to add. Those of you who have experience with reading EPUB or recommending EPUB, go ahead and use the chat to share your thoughts. I'm just going to be quiet, give you a second to think, and then just share it. We'll do about a minute or so. Go ahead and use the chat to share your thoughts. So what resonates with you in terms of the benefits of EPUB? I will also note a couple of questions here that have come up. So after you've done entering your thoughts in the chat, I will come back and address those questions. I see a couple of points, really excellent points coming through. Cassidy, you mentioned being able to pick up where you left off in terms of reading, and a lot of the reading apps support the ability to set a bookmark. So you can also save specific sections that are important to you or that you want to go back and review. So that's also a very valuable thing. And then a lot of apps also support the ability to take notes and highlight. So that makes it a great study tool. A question here from Jason: are all EPUBs created equal? So I don't know, Christine, do you want to take that one first? And then I can share my thoughts as well.
So generally, if the EPUB was created in the way that, is sort of true to form, it should be, but we do oftentimes want to a clarifier around ask for EPUB and say ask for accessible EPUB. So as long as the creators of the EPUB are taking full advantage of in creating the content in the way that is keeping accessibility in mind, then EPUB should be accessible. But I think that won't always be the case. You may find that that's not the case. In fact, one of the things that Luis is going to cover today is when you're creating your own EPUB content using, let's say, Word to EPUB, this conversion tool that's available for free, you'll want to make sure that you've structured the Word document ahead of time, that it is fully navigable and takes advantage of headings and the structure that Word offers that ensures accessibility. If you were to do something like put in to use the space bar to move things around on your page rather than to use the sort of tiered tab structure in Word, for example, it will result in an EPUB that isn't fully accessible. So as long as the file is built correctly, it should be EPUB, but you may want to just be on the safe side and ask for accessible EPUB.
Absolutely. That's a great answer, Christine. So the real important thing is to make sure that the source file, you start out with a good source file. And that's the case for many of these formats, right? Same thing with PDF. You can have really accessible PDF if the author has taken care to produce a really good source file and then going through the export process in the appropriate way. And so it's the same thing with EPUB. We want to make sure we do as much as possible in that source file to make it as accessible as possible so that when we do the export, we end up with a file that's, again, works for the widest variability of learners out there. So that's one question that came up. There was another question. We mentioned that There are some things that you can find on the AIM Center website. So if I'll see if I can get the link for you, but we do have a checklist for evaluating materials, and it's based on the 4 principles of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, so the 4 POUR principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So that gives you a set of questions that you can use to evaluate any kind of material to make sure that it is accessible and it meets again, the needs of the widest range of learners as possible. So we'll see if we can share that in the chat, but I appreciate all your comments in the chat. And, you know, a lot of you appreciate the reflowable nature of EPUB, the ability to resize the text obviously benefits a number of different people. And then the non-proprietary, somebody mentioned it, hopefully I get your name right, Kestrel. The fact that it's non-proprietary, so it's a standard that can be shared across different platforms and has really wide support. Great. So thank you for sharing your thoughts in the chat. That's exactly what we hope for, is to make this as interactive as possible. And that really helps to, you know, make the content a little bit more engaging. So next we're going to look at, you know, in the previous 2 webinars, we really focus on sort of driving the demand for accessible publishing in EPUB format. So today we're going to focus a little bit more on, let's say that you're creating a document. This is a teacher created or educator created document. What are some of the things that you can do to make it more accessible when it is exported to EPUB? So as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to focus on a couple of workflows here. The first one is using a free tool called Word to EPUB. And then the second one is using an online tool called Open Author. And we'll have the handout will have links to both of these so that you can download them in the case of Word to EPUB, or access it and create an account in the case of Open Author. So let's just go over some of the best practices. This came up in the previous question. Again, it's really important to, you know, start with accessible content in the source file before you do the export, regardless of which format you're going to end up with or what tools you're using. So there are some general best practices that you want to follow when you're working with a source file. So for instance, if you're working in Microsoft Word, before you export to EPUB, you want to make sure that you're adding the proper markup for things like headings, lists, and so on. And the way you do that is by using the styles features in your authoring environment. So in Microsoft Word, in the ribbon at the top of the screen, I believe it's in the Home tab, there is a series of different heading styles. So you want to make sure that you are structuring your document using those heading styles, as opposed to just selecting the text and making it bigger and making it bold, because that the styles add the proper markup that we need for that conversion to take place correctly. And the same thing for lists. We want to add alternative text to our images so that if someone is using assistive technology like a screen reader, which will read the content out loud or text to speech, they can hear a description of the images. And then also very important is to add accessibility metadata. So who is the author? What is the title, the descriptive title for the book or the document that you're creating? And that really helps people find the content. We can also provide some keywords and a description. So that's really helpful. And then finally, when we use tables, we want to make sure that the tables have the proper headers specified. So that first row, you know, typically people make it bold to emphasize that it's a table header, but we also, again, want to make sure that we're adding the appropriate markup. And in your authoring environment, there's usually a checkbox. I know there is in Microsoft Word where you can say add a header row. So we want to make sure we do that. So there are a couple of AIM Center resources. These are included in the handout. And Leslie has also shared the links in the chat, but you can also always do a search on our website and we'll take you to the appropriate resources. So if you do a search for accessible documents, There's a resource, creating accessible documents and slide decks. And that's a really good starting point. It just focuses on 5 or 6 practices that are really high leverage practices where with just a few changes, you can have a significant impact on the experience with that document that people with a wide range of different needs will have. And then if you want to get into more detail, then the next resource, Designing for Accessibility with POUR, really goes into the principles of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines when it comes to documents. And it looks at them in more detail and a little bit more with examples and makes it more concrete. So again, you can do a search for accessible documents, or you can do a search for POUR on our website, and it will take you to one of these resources, but we've also included links to them on the handout. So in general, the workflow, if you're, I'm going to focus first on Word to EPUB. So here we're starting out in Microsoft Word. So our workflow will generally follow this process. First, we want to check the source file for accessibility. So we want to check our work before we do the export. And in Office, there's a built-in accessibility checker. You can find it in the Review tab of the ribbon. And there you'll see a button called Check Accessibility. And I believe it's the 3rd or 4th option from the left when you open the Review tab of the ribbon. And so you want to make sure that you're addressing all those issues that the accessibility checker might bring up. So it will identify any images that don't have alternative text, for example, and so on. And then once you've done that check, you want to export to EPUB. And you'll use a free plugin from Microsoft Word for Windows. So I want to make sure I note that. At this time, Word to EPUB is only available for Windows, but we hope that in the future, it's available for the Mac as well. And then the last step is you would check the exported file. The DAISY Consortium has created a free tool that allows you to check the accessibility of any EPUB. That includes ones you create yourself through this workflow, but any other EPUBs that you have downloaded, you can check for accessibility using this free ACE by DAISY tool. And we have a link to that in the handout as well. So this workflow is relying on, with the exception of Microsoft Word, on these free tools, Word to EPUB and ACE by DAISY. All right, so I'm going to do a couple of demos here, and rather than doing them live, where Murphy's Law can always take over, I have recorded a couple of videos. Now, this first video was recorded on my Windows laptop, so the sound may be a little bit on the low side. I have a different microphone, so if you can't hear it at first, just bump up your audio a little bit, and you should be able to hear it a little bit better. So in this demo, I'm just going to demonstrate how to use Word to EPUB using a Microsoft Word document. Now with Word to EPUB, you have 3 options for how you can create an EPUB out of a Microsoft Word file. You can open the file in the application, right? So it's not just a plugin for Microsoft Word. You can actually launch Word to EPUB as its own application, and then you can open the Word file inside Word to EPUB and then export it from there. You can also find the Word document in your Windows Explorer, your file system, right-click on it, or use the contextual menu, and then choose Convert to EPUB. Or you can do the last option here, which is what we're going to focus on in this demo, which is you're authoring in Microsoft Word, you do your accessibility check in there, and then the last step is to export it right from within Microsoft Word. I like that last workflow because I think it's a little bit more seamless. You don't have to go out and find that file and follow all these other steps. So let's take a look at this video. Again, if you can't hear it, it's not loud enough, just adjust your audio a little bit and we should be okay. And the video begins with a little bit of silence at the beginning because there's the screen just with the title, just to let you know. It's just the title of the demo. So the demo is creating EPUB with Word to EPUB. That's the title screen. And then I'll take over from there in the audio.
Hey, Luis, we can't hear the audio.
I've gone ahead and stopped it. Let me try sharing that again. Maybe it dropped off at some point. Share computer sound. Okay, let's try that again. Let me know, Christine, or others in the chat, if you're able to hear the audio. Remember, it's going to be silent at the beginning. It's just a title slide. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how in just a few steps, you can create your own EPUB file by using the free Word to EPUB plugin for Microsoft Word for Windows that is available from the DAISY Consortium. I've already installed Word to EPUB, and it has added an additional icon to the Home tab of the ribbon in my Microsoft Word application. Now, before I export to EPUB using this plugin, I want to make sure that my document follows accessibility best practices. So I'm going to check my work by choosing the Review tab of the ribbon, and then there's an option for checking the accessibility. This is the built-in accessibility checker in Microsoft Office. I'll go ahead and choose Check Accessibility. This will open up a pane on the right side of the screen. This is the accessibility pane, and it lists all of the errors that it found in this document. Fortunately for me, there's only one problem here. One of the images is missing alternative text, which is a description of the image for those that use a screen reader or text-to-speech. I can select the image from the list, and then in this version of Microsoft Word, there is a drop-down menu with some recommended actions. I can choose to mark the image as decoration, in which case the screen reader will skip it. I may want to do that if the image is already described in the surrounding text to avoid any redundancy. Or I can choose Add a Description. And then this will open up the alt text pane. I can enter the alternative text for this image. Once I've done that, I'll go ahead and close that pane. And now if I go back to the accessibility pane, again, I can do that by choosing Review, Check Accessibility. It will say that no accessibility issues have been found. This checker is not perfect, but will identify some of the most common accessibility errors. So it's a good thing to do before you do any kind of exporting to another format from Microsoft Word. All right, with that out of the way, I'll go ahead and choose the Home tab of the ribbon. And like I said, if I have Word to EPUB installed, there'll be an additional icon at the end of this Home tab for Word to EPUB. I'll go ahead and select that icon. And it's going to let me know that I have some unsaved changes. So I need to make sure to save the document first before I export it. Now let's try that again. I'm going to choose the Word to EPUB option in the Home tab of the ribbon. And this will open up a dialog window. I'll select the Advanced tab. Here I want to make sure that the correct metadata has been entered. The title of the document, in this case it's The Nature of Science, the creator, and so on. For this brief video, we're going to keep this simple. Choose a descriptive file name, and then just choose OK. And in just a few seconds, our EPUB will be created. I can close Word to EPUB, or I can choose View EPUB, and it will open the EPUB file that we just created in our default application for reading EPUB. For me, that's the Thorium Reader for Windows. Once the EPUB is open in Thorium Reader, I have access to all of the options within this Reader application to customize the appearance of the content as well as use Read Aloud. Near the upper right hand corner of the Thorium interface, there's a Settings button. I can select this button to open up all of my appearance options. I can choose a different theme. I can change the text size, select a different font, and more. And in the latest version of the Thorium Reader, I also have access to text-to-speech.
Lesson 1.1, Nature of Science. Lesson objectives. List the principles that
All right, so that is the end of the video. Hopefully you can all still hear me. So again, I just want to summarize and then pause here and see if you have any questions about this workflow. So this first workflow, we're starting with a source file that we're working on in Microsoft Word. We're checking it for accessibility, making sure we have good structure with headings that have styles applied to them. We're using the list style to create our list, making sure our tables have headers and so on and so forth. And then we want to make sure we do that check. And once we're done with addressing some of those accessibility issues, it's as simple as selecting a button in the ribbon, in the home tab of the ribbon, and going through the export process. So there's a lot more that you can do with Word to EPUB. And the DAISY Consortium recently did a webinar that's available on their website where they go into way more detail than what we have time for today. But even with just the basic workflow of going in and putting in some simple metadata and then choosing export, you'll end up with a nice EPUB that you can open in an application like Thorium or Books if you're on a Mac. And you'll be able to navigate it in a variety of different ways, use read aloud, customize it, using some of these appearance options, and so on. In the last webinar, I showed how Thorium Reader can also be used with a screen reader like NVDA to navigate an EPUB title. So you may want to check that out as well. So let's take a look. I'll pause here, see if there's some questions I know that are coming through.
Hey, Luis, while you're reviewing those questions, I noticed on my version of Word that accessibility checker is not in the ribbon above. I'm sure that there's a way to add it, but I get to it just by in the tell me what you want to do box. I just type in accessibility. It brings up the checker. I'm sure there's a way to permanently add it to my ribbon. I just don't know how to do that myself. So maybe you do. But I just want to mention that most folks should be able to find it in their version of Word.
Yeah, if you're in doubt and you can't find something, there is that search feature. And when you start typing in accessibility, it should be one of the first options. You can also, I believe, right-click the ribbon and choose customize, and then you can add options so that they're available for you permanently. So there's different ways to do it.
Yeah, and Christine, just to hide, this is Leslie, just to get back to you. I do know that depending on how your ribbon is customized, but under the review tab is where the accessibility checker lives.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It's not in my review tab. So yeah, it's not there. So
yeah, if you add it, that's where I'm just saying if you do add it, it's going to end up living there. So you know where to find it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So let's see some of the other questions here. I have a question from John here. Does Word to EPUB also contain an EPUB reader? So this is a tool just to export, right? So it's a plugin to export that Word document, and then you would use a separate application to read that content. Now, there is a View EPUB button in Word to EPUB when you're done with the export. And what that's going to do is it's going to open whatever application you've assigned to open EPUB titles. And so in my case, I have it assigned to Thorium, but you may have other applications that can read EPUB. So it's just going to open it in that default reader where you can customize it. Kestrel has a question about, is the workflow accessible to a JAWS user? I believe so. The DAISY Consortium has done a lot of work to make sure that Word to EPUB is accessible. And if you've navigated Word before, then you should be able to go through this workflow. And I know that Thorium Reader is also accessible to screen reader users. I don't have JAWS at the moment to test it out, but I've used NVDA and it's been fine for me with NVDA. So you should be able to go through this whole workflow. Those three applications, Microsoft Word, Word to EPUB, and the Thorium Reader, if you want to go with that combination, should work. So Sonia has a question about math. That's always a really interesting question. And is that read correctly by the built-in reader? So I will say this, Sonia, Thorium Reader has some capabilities for reading math. And I have had luck with being able to access some existing EPUB titles that had math in them. And then there is an option within Thorium where you can turn on something called MathJax. And so with MathJax turned on, I was able to listen to some of the math expressions and they were read out loud correctly in the right order and so on. I know that there are some additional steps that you need to do within Word before you export using Word to EPUB to make sure that it all works with math. So if you want to reach out separately, it's a little bit more of an advanced topic than we have time for during this webinar, but I'm happy anyone who's interested in that question, just reach out to us and I'll be happy to go over that with you. So I see a number of questions about the review tab. And then Sonia, you're on the Mac, so I'm going to show you a separate workflow here that you can also use to create EPUB. Just being aware that not everybody is on the Windows system, but unfortunately Word to EPUB right now only works on Windows. Hopefully we'll have a Mac version of that. I think those are all the questions that we have so far. So I'm going to continue here with the rest of the presentation. These are all excellent questions. So please feel free to continue sharing in the chat.
Hey, Luis, just real quick, there was a question about a district that's Chrome based and how can students access EPUBs in that environment? And if you're not able to use, for example, Thorium Reader, what other tools are out there? And actually, there are a lot of EPUB readers. If you just go to just launch a browser and search for EPUB readers, there are a number of them that are sprouting up, which is a good thing. So there very well likely will be something that you can use in a Chrome environment to read an EPUB. And many of them allow you to actually upload your own, EPUB content to the reader. And so I would encourage that. And right, Microsoft Edge can use many of the Chrome extensions. That's a great point too. So again, just search for those readers. There are becoming more and more of them out there. I know that one tool, for example, that does read Bookshare books in a Chrome environment is CaptiVoice. They have a free version and also a paid version, and it depends on how large the file is as to which version you'll need. The relatively smaller books can be uploaded in the free version, but the larger versions of books, you're going to need the paid version of CaptiVoice. But CaptiVoice.org is a web-based tool that does read EPUB. That can be accessed in a Chrome environment. And there are many others as well. So just do a search and I'm sure you'll find something that works.
And we'll share just a few across the different platforms at the end here, because once you create them, you want to be able to read them as well, right? So we'll share just a few options as a starting point. And the last question here before I jump into the final demo is around different languages. So can you create, content that has multiple languages? And the answer is yes, Heather. So again, you'll have to work within Microsoft Word to make sure that you are, specifying the language for the document as a whole. And then if you have sections that have different languages, maybe you have a document that has a section that's in Spanish, you want to specify the language for that section as well. And I'm sure if you Google, how to specify the language in Microsoft Word, there'll be instructions for how to do that. But then when you export out to, the EPUB format, it will keep that information. And so it will be accessible in terms of the screen reader or the text-to-speech, being able to select the appropriate voice for each piece of content.
Right. So just to clarify on that, though, you would need a text-to-speech voice on the other end that is in that language. So
Correct.
You may have to alternate between, if you've got content that's multilingual that maybe is English and Spanish, for example, you'd have to alternate between an English text-to-speech voice and a Spanish text-to-speech voice, using the native text-to-speech voice for that particular content.
And Heather, if it's not multilingual, even easier. You just have to specify the language once.
Right, but you do have to have there has to be a text-to-speech voice tool or text-to-speech tool that reads in that language. And there are lots of those available now. Many of the tools have a number of language options in them, but you definitely don't want to try to read a foreign language document with an English, American English text-to-speech voice. That would be pretty much of a disaster.
And I'll save this last question for the end here. So remind me to come back to this. Is there a way to fix inaccessible EPUBs? So Jason, hold on to that question. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Let me go back to the slides here. So thank you everyone for your excellent questions that you're sharing in the chat. That's exactly what we want. All right, so there are other options for authoring. For example, Google Docs has an option where you can download your Google Doc as an EPUB document. And we have found some issues with that, but for a very simple document that's primarily text, this may be an option that will work. Apple's Pages, so if you're on the Mac or on an iPad, there are some templates that are built into Apple's Pages, but you want to make sure if you want a reflowable EPUB, which is what we've been talking about, this is an EPUB where you can change the text size and the content will reflow. You want to make sure you choose the portrait templates within Apple's Pages. And then the last option gets to Jason's questions. And there is a tool called Sigil, S-I-G-I-L. It's a free tool available for Windows and the Mac. And with Sigil, you can open an EPUB and you can explore the individual files that make it up. And you can fix any errors. For instance, if the wrong heading level was used, you can fix that in an existing EPUB. So that's a little bit more of an advanced tool. It's an authoring tool, just like Microsoft Word is. So it gives you some options of going in and performing more editing with that, that source file. All right, so if you all hear a dog behind me here, I apologize in advance, but as you probably understand, with all of us working from home, we have other creatures in our home. So he may start barking anytime now. All right, so I'm going to play the second video. So this answers one of the questions about, well, what if I don't have Microsoft Word and I want to create an EPUB? So here's another option, which is to use OpenAuthor. So there's a repository of open educational resources called OER Commons. So open educational resources are resources where the author, attaches a license to it that gives you certain rights, such as the right to redistribute or to reuse, to remix. And so it's becoming really popular, as you can imagine, with limited budgets. It's a great option for addressing equity issues and making sure that people can access things like textbooks without the high costs associated with them. So open educational resources are really important, and OER Commons is a repository of those types of resources, and it has its own authoring environment called OpenAuthor. And what I want to highlight is two things about OpenAuthor that we're really excited about. One is that it has a built-in accessibility checker, and the second is that it can export to EPUB 3. And so that can be also an option for you to create accessible EPUB. So let's take a look at how this works with a quick, about 5-minute demo of this process. And let me know in the chat if you can't hear the audio. Hopefully you will with this one. And again, the title screen is creating an EPUB with OpenAuthor. So it's going to start with that, and then I'll take over with the audio after that.
In this video, I'm going to show you how to create an EPUB using OpenAuthor, which is the authoring tool for OER or open educational resources that are meant to live on OER Commons. Here, I've already logged into OER Commons at oercommons.org. At the top of the screen, there's an option for adding a new OER or open educational resource. I'll select that option. And on the menu that opens up, there'll be an option for OpenAuthor, and I'll choose Create Resource underneath that. This will open the OpenAuthor editing environment. And here I can enter a title for the EPUB file that I want to create. I can add a title image. And then I can start building out my EPUB file by creating a number of sections. I'll go ahead and paste some text that I've copied ahead of time to save us some time. And this editor should look familiar to you if you've ever used a learning management system. You have all of your options that you would expect here. You can add headings by using the Styles pull-down menu, adding lists, changing the spacing, and so on. One of my favorite options here is the fact that for each of these sections, you can do a quick accessibility check. The accessibility checker is the first option or the first icon in this toolbar. Let's go ahead and give that a try. Here, the accessibility checker has found that I'm using headings in the incorrect order. I've skipped a level in the heading structure. So I've gone from a heading level 2 for an industry standard to a heading level 4 for advantages. And the accessibility checker has flagged that. And then what's nice here is that it gives me a suggestion. So it thinks that it should be a heading level 3. And if this were a subsection of an industry standard, that would be fine. But in this case, I actually want to make it a heading level 2, because it's going to be at the same level. Once I've chosen H2, I can do a quick fix. Get a prompt that'll let me know that there are no other accessibility issues with this section. I'll go ahead and choose close. And then now I'm ready to export. Of course, I could also add additional sections. If I scroll down to the bottom, there's an option for inserting a new section here. Once you're done with all of your editing, you can choose Save, Preview to see what this will look like when it's published, and then Next to go to the next step, which is to publish a resource. You'll then need to provide a description of the resource, choose the conditions for use, which is the license, and then enter the appropriate metadata, including the subject and so on. Towards the bottom of the screen, you'll need to check the box declaring that you have the right to use and share all images and other content in this resource. And then the last step is to select Publish. You can then view the resource within OER Commons, or towards the top of the screen, there's an icon for download. And in here, you can see that EPUB 3 is provided as one of the options. So let's go ahead and choose EPUB 3. This will download the content to our computer, and then we can open it in our preferred reading app. I'm on a Mac, and my preferred reading app is Books. And now I have my EPUB open. I can go up to the top of the interface, and in the upper right-hand corner, I have my appearance options. I can change the theme, choose a different font, and adjust the text size, and so on. So I have all of the options that I would typically have with an EPUB when I open it in my reading app.
All right, so that's it for that demo. So just to summarize, you can use Open Author to create an EPUB with multiple sections. And for each of those sections, you can do a quick accessibility check. And then you can export out to EPUB 3, which is the latest standard or version of the EPUB standard. And then you could open that with your application for reading EPUB and customize the appearance and use read aloud, use the screen reader that's built into your platform or the screen reader that you prefer, and then you can access that content in a variety of different ways. So that may be an option if you're, you don't have access to Microsoft Word, you can't do the first workflow with Word to EPUB. This may be another option of a way that you can create accessible EPUB. So as we mentioned, there's lots of different tools for reading EPUB. So this is just a partial reader list here. I've already mentioned a couple of these that I use myself. Thorium Reader for Windows is excellent. It has read out loud built into it, lots of options for customizing the appearance. Works great with screen readers. Also has math jacks built into it, so you can access math content inside of it. Apple Books is built into Apple devices, right? So if you're in the Mac, if you're in an iPad, Dolphin Easy Reader, the mobile version is free. So if you're on an Android device or if you're preferred more options than what Apple Books offers on your iPad, then Dolphin Easy Reader is a great option there as well. And then there are a couple of tools here. Christine, you want to talk a little bit about Bookshare Web Reader and then Read and Write, which by the way, you demoed in the last webinar. So you can check out the recording of that webinar to learn more about those two tools.
Yeah, so Bookshare Web Reader is a web-based reading tool available to all Bookshare members, and it only reads Bookshare books, so it can't be used to upload other content. But Bookshare Web Reader is a nice, easy way for individuals who are Bookshare members to open up content using a button on the screen next to the book that just says read now, and it launches the browser and launches the browser-based reading tool, allows them to read it in that tool with some customization options. I should mention that we're embarking on a redo of Bookshare Web Reader, so we'll be sometime, hopefully in the early part of next year, sometime next year, let's just say that for sure.
You heard it here first.
You'll be able to see a new revision to Bookshare Web Reader, but it is a decent reading experience, and the opportunity to add some tools on top of Bookshare Web Reader like Read and Write and Snap and Read are very helpful. They allow to add more functionality to Bookshare Web Reader. For example, the ability to select where you want to start reading, which Bookshare Web Reader in itself is not great at. The ability to, in some cases, add more notes or add your own highlighting. Those either Read and Write or Snap and Read offer those different functions. So we like recommending using the Read and Write extension with Bookshare Web Reader. And those extensions are available in Chrome, of course, as well as in Safari and in the latest Edge browser. And in fact, Bookshare Web Reader itself reads well in the very latest Edge browser with the text-to-speech and word highlighting. So we recommend using those two tools along with Bookshare Web Reader, Snap and Read and Read and Write.
Great. So the main takeaway is that lots of options out there in terms of the tools you can use. And if you're creating your own EPUBs using the workflows we discussed this afternoon, well, all of these, most of these tools here, like Thorium, Apple Books, they allowed you to load other, EPUBs from a variety of sources so that you can use them to read the content you've created in this format. All right, so we are coming to the end of our time together. So I will give you a second if you have any last minute questions. We'll also share our contact information in the chat. And it's also included in the slides. So you can always reach out to us if you have any questions about any of these webinars. So if this is the first one that you're attending or watching, reach out to us if you have any questions. But if you've watched any of the other ones, you still have some outstanding questions, again, reach out to us and we'll be happy to help. We also have a page on the AIM Center website. It's called Getting Started with EPUB. And it's a really nice summary of what it is. How does it compare to other formats? We're going to be updating that page now that we've done these webinars. And so we're going to be posting the videos that you just watched. We're going to do a little bit of tweaking to them, add some captions, and then we will post them on our website real soon. And of course, you can watch the recording of this webinar, and that will have closed captions as well. So that's another way that you can get access to this content after the fact. But we want to turn it to you now, and we want to issue a challenge to you, because if you've come to this webinar to learn about EPUB, the best way to check your understanding is to try this out. So our challenge to you is to take a document that you're using in your classroom, check that document for accessibility, and then export it as an EPUB file and try to open it in one of the free readers, something like Thorium or Books, and try out that experience. And even better, try it out with one of your students and see what you learn about their experience, what's helpful, what's not helpful. Because again, part of the goal here is to help students find those preferences that will help them in the future as they go off to college or as they go into the workforce, and they need to be able to do this independently. We want them to develop that toolkit and have those preferences on hand that work for them. So that's our challenge to you, is to go back, review some of the handouts, some of the webinars, and then try this out for yourself and create that document and try reading it with a number of different tools. So we're going to open it up. I'm going to stick around for just a second or so, see if you have any last minute questions. But again, you can reach out to me. I'm lperez@cas.org. You can find me through the AIM Center website. You can reach out to any of us on the AIM Center team, and we'll be happy to help you out. And Christine's information has also been shared, and that's christinej@benetech.org. We're both happy to answer questions that you have after this webinar series. So I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate you being here. I want to thank, as always, Christine. She's a great co-presenter, so it's been a pleasure doing this series with you. Leslie for being the chat guru and addressing all of our challenges there, and also sharing all the resources and links. And also Darla from ACS for helping us out with the captions. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar and the series, and we'll see you on another one real soon. And Christine, any final thought before we go?
No, there are definitely some other questions coming in, and folks can just reach out to us indirectly, I think.
Absolutely. We're happy to help at any time. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and take care.